That's me, sorry. Which one? I don't know.
Microphone's off. No, so I'm live in Columbia. I'm not. Well, that you just don't know. Yeah. For example, last night, the text was oh, sure. Yeah. Yeah. That would make sense. But no. All of this. I saw a great thing today. Well, I mean,
All right. Can you all hear me in the room? Fantastic. We will go ahead and it's 9 o'clock. We'll go ahead and get started. Um, for those of you who don't know, my name is Josh Campbell. I'm the executive director of the Missouri Energy Initiative. This is a new venue for us. Polsinelli is on the MEI board, and there's a small thing currently going on at Union Station. I don't know if you all heard about it. So it did make it a little bit more difficult to gain access there. And we had some trouble last year with the audio visual for both people in seat as well as virtual. So we are trying something different. And I hope that you all will be as pleased as I am so far with Polsinelli's facilities. They've been a great partner here, as well as some other work that we do with PACE. And I know many of you work with them on the energy side everywhere else. So both as a sponsor and as a host, I definitely want to thank Polsinelli very much. And before I go any further, right, we have had some employee transitions, and so I think our communication has been lax, and I apologize, and I'm so grateful for all of your patience for this. But this event would not have been able to happen if it wasn't for our partner, Rachel Hassani, who's in the back. So thank you, Rachel, so much for helping put this together. Um, and part of those issues we also hope to address with the new hire, an MU grad. Matthew Harding in the back is our new policy coordinator, starts after graduation in May. So hopefully you'll all be working with him. And I don't know, Rachel, do I need to be standing over there? I don't remember
You're
where the
okay.
camera is.
You're
So,
totally fine. Everyone
okay.
can see you just fine.
Okay. So, hopefully, Matt will be working with you on a variety of things. Since our last conference in December, MEI has held multiple events on the Inflation Reduction Act, the development of a green bank. Our hope there is to try and coordinate partners so Missouri can access more funding. That presentation is going to kick us off today. Our goal is there's a lot of money out there. There's a lot of questions, but there's a lot of good work that can happen here as well. So whether it's hard in the ground infrastructure, whether it's workforce training, there's a lot of things that Missouri can benefit from. So really do appreciate you coming here today, both in person and virtual. If you have any questions, on breaks, feel free to ask. Any ideas, we are always open. But outside of Rachel and Matt and Polsinelli helping us get this done, we would not have this conference if it wasn't for our board. And we do have several members here on the board. We have both Ron Wood, who is a board member, and I know Jabbar's not a board member, but he is with Spire. And they are a board member. And in the back, we have folks from Evergy. So want to thank you all very much for that. And then obviously our sponsors, gold sponsors this year include Ameren, Missouri, Evergy, and the Nature Conservancy. The silver sponsor this year is Spire. Our bronze sponsor is Polsinelli. The partner that we have this year is the Missourians for a Balanced Energy Future. And we have the marketing partner of the Energy Bar Association, trying to develop collaborations there, integrating in what they do nationally. Media partners, including the Energy News Network and RTO Insider. So want to thank those partners and sponsors to make today absolutely possible. If you haven't heard already, right, there's coffee, tea, and soda and water in the back of the room. There is some breakfast in the hallway out there. Feel free to do that. Wi-Fi is available. If you're not aware so far, you can log on. If you go to your browser or Wi-Fi availability, Polsinelli Guest, and then it'll take you to their website. You just put in your name, email address, and then you'll have access. If you do need the restroom and you're unaware, what you do is come out this door, go to the main desk, turn left, and then make another left, and you'll have access there. There is networking breaks throughout the day as well. Lunch should be around 11:45. There is a mother's room available on the 4th floor. You can talk to Rachel if you have any questions there. And so while we definitely are excited to have you back in person and continue to have that opportunity to both in person, we do have folks streaming. We'll have participants online as well as presenters. It allows us to expand the reach of the partners that we do have for the day. If any folks online have any problems, I do want you to reach out to us at MEPS@moenergy.org. And Rachel and Matt will be able to respond. Hopefully you all have an agenda in front of you for today. But up until our next break, we've got 2 really interesting sessions. The first one is just giving you an update on the Energy Bank, the BIL or IJ, IRA, all that combination. And then following that, we do have a discussion about large power users, specifically what their value, their risk is to the grid and to other customers. And we'll go into a break after that for about 15 minutes. And so with our first session, we do have both Marty Hyman from the Division of Energy and Joe Boland from EIERA, who have been on somewhat of a roadshow for this particular topic, but you know, you've got almost $1 trillion coming. You want to make sure people are aware. So really do appreciate both of you coming in this morning and being able to share where we stand. And if there are not any other questions, I would invite both Marty and Joe to hop up and present. We have a clicker for you here, and then you can either use a handheld mic if you want to walk around, or there's a podium mic. So whichever one you prefer. Dealer's choice. What's that?
Said podium's always
Podium's good. Okay. And then Marty, there's a chair back here if you'd like to use it. We can put it out in front as well, whatever your preference is. Oh. Yeah.
Let's see if I can get this to work. All right. Good morning, everybody. My name is Joe Bolin. I'm the Executive Director of the Environmental Improvement and Energy Resources Authority. We're administratively assigned to. Okay, operator error, obviously, starting early. We are administratively assigned to the Department of Natural Resources, but we are an independent agency. We're created in 1972 as an independent, self-supporting quasi-governmental agency governed by a 5-member board, which is appointed by the governor and approved by the Senate. Technically, we're a body corporate and politic, and we are authorized to finance, acquire, construct, and equip projects for the purpose of reducing, preventing, or controlling pollution, and more importantly, to provide for the development of energy resources in the state of Missouri. We're also empowered to conduct environmental and energy research and development activities, develop alternative methods of financing environmental and energy projects, and assist Missouri communities, organizations, and businesses in obtaining low-cost funds and other financial assistance for projects related to the authority's purposes as defined in statute. So to date, we have issued over $6 billion in bonds and loans. For the last 30 years, we've been focusing on the Department of Natural Resources state revolving funds, the water and wastewater revolving funds. We're a partner with DNR in administering that program. So we basically leverage their capital to provide more possibilities for loans and grants. On the solid waste management side, we also operate a market development program where we provide funding for entrepreneurs and small businesses to develop products from recycled content materials, which has been, we began that in 1992. We also operate a small brownfields revolving loan fund to develop contaminated properties for redevelopment. So our latest initiative, as Josh mentioned, is the Missouri Energy Infrastructure Bank. We have a broad array of authorities in statute. We're behind some states as far as getting a green bank up and going, but we're way ahead of others in that we already have the statutory authority and other requirements in place. But so I'm going to touch on the Energy Infrastructure Bank concept, but one of our issues is we do not have any capital right now. We receive no state funds. So one of our challenges is capitalizing that bank. And that's one of the main things I'm talking about today is the Inflation Reduction Act, specifically Section 60103, which is the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, which the GHG is providing $27 billion in funds for three main components, and I'll break those down here in a little bit. But we've been participating on some work groups nationally, providing EPA with comments and basically not just comments, but advice on through the Coalition for Green Capital and the American Green Bank Consortium in how to best implement this program. So we'll be talking a little bit more detail shortly. This slide was obviously stolen from EPA. It gives a very quick breakdown of the $27 billion. The first is a $7 billion component for what they deem zero emission technologies. What that really translates into is rooftop solar. And we'll break that down a little bit here later. The other pot is a $20 billion pot, broken into 12 billion general projects and another 8 billion in general projects, but specifically for low income and disadvantaged communities. What's important to know is the $7 billion pot for rooftop solar. The eligible applicants are states, municipalities, tribes, and certain other nonprofit groups. On the 20, so EPA, and again, I'll talk more about the applicants later, but on the $20 billion pot, which is by far the largest, the eligible recipients are only designated eligible nonprofits, which are further defined in the statute. So that's going to be a very important component that we look at here later. So as I mentioned, the $7 billion for zero emissions technology or rooftop solar, EPA has in their initial guidance, which came out in the middle of February, they had stated they will accept up to 60 applications, which tells us that, you know, there's going to be an allocation for each state, some tribal organizations, and some major metro areas. One of the other provisions is they're expecting this money to be leveraged, which is what we do. The $20 billion pot is important to note that there will be accepting 2 to 15 applications. And again, those are eligible nonprofit entities as defined in the statute. Fast forward to last Wednesday. Did I get the right one up there? Skip ahead. There's like 6 slides missing here. So I apologize. I'm not sure what happened. Well, I'll try and break this down without the slides. But so the original guidance came out in the middle of February. They were announcing 2 program competitions. The guidance last Wednesday, they're now they're breaking it down into 3 competitions. Again, the $7 billion for rooftop solar, which they renamed Solar for All. They're accepting 60 applications from states, tribes, municipalities, and other eligible nonprofits. The $20 billion is now broken into a $14 billion pot and a $6 billion pot. The $14 billion is for a National Clean Investment Fund competition. These, they'll be accepting 2 to 3 applications for that $14 billion. And they are expecting those grantees to cooperate with other private capital providers to deliver financing at scale to businesses and communities. So what that really translates into from our reading of the guidance is that's going to be the direct funding pot. Those 2 to 3 nonprofits are going to turn around, invest some of that money in some very large scale projects. So the competition for that will be very interesting to watch. On the $6 million pot, the National Clean Communities Investment Accelerator competition, these pots seem to be more blurred in their distinction than what they were before, but the major distinction is the $14 billion is going to be a direct investment by those national nonprofits. The $6 billion is going to be indirect investment through agencies like our own, CDFIs, credit unions, other local lenders that are involved in low income and disadvantaged community investment. So, and again, the application processes have not been defined yet. It's going to be interesting to see how that all comes together. But EPA states that these grants will empower centralized national nonprofits to provide direct investments in projects across the country while simultaneously empowering hub nonprofits to support networks of community lenders that will ensure the deployment of clean energy projects to low income and disadvantaged communities. So there's obviously again, a direct versus indirect focus there. So EPA has broken the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund into three major objectives and priorities. One is obviously to reduce emissions of greenhouse gases and other air pollutants. Two is to deliver benefits of greenhouse gas and air pollution reducing projects to American communities, particularly in low income and disadvantaged communities. That's you'll hear that focus throughout the entire guidance. That's again the implementation of the Justice 40 initiative. And the last objective is to mobilize financing and private capital to stimulate the additional deployment of greenhouse gas and air pollution reducing technologies. And this is another theme that is repeated throughout the guidance as well. EPA is expecting these funds to be leveraged, and a lot of private capital is expected to be infused in these programs through that leveraging. So further into the guidance, EPA does finally define some priority categories. For the 14 billion and $6 billion pots, they share the exact same priorities, and there are three: distributed power generation and storage, decarbonization of retrofits of existing buildings, and then transportation pollution reduction. Those are very broad categories, obviously. So examples of distributed power, well, I really probably don't need to tell you, but EPA is including distributed solar, distributed wind, geothermal, standalone energy, and community microgrids as examples. For the decarbonization, retrofits, indoor air quality improvements and combined with solar, school building space and water heating grid, interactive electrification, and energy efficiency, and replacement of backup diesel generators with battery storage. And then finally, transportation sector, small business and government fleet electrification, and of course, EV charging stations are going to be a pretty common thing. Focusing on the $7 billion rooftop solar category, the priority categories are, not surprisingly, residential solar, community solar, associated storage, and then what they defined as enabling upgrades, which we were very happy to see. This is just building envelope upgrades, roof repairs, anything to improve the building envelope. So nobody wants to install solar on a leaky building. It just doesn't make much sense. So. And again, I apologize for not having the slides here. I'm not sure what happened. So getting back to basics, we, after muddling through EPA's new language, I thought it's important to kind of regain some clarity and look at the statute itself, just to kind of remind ourselves how broad some of these categories are going to be. So under the $20 billion general assistance and low income disadvantaged communities category, Section 134C3 defines a qualified project as any project, activity, or technology that reduces or avoids greenhouse gas emissions and other forms of air pollution in partnership with, here it is again, by leveraging investment from the private sector, or assist communities in the efforts of these communities to reduce or avoid greenhouse gas emissions and other forms of air pollution. So those are, again, pretty broad. Looking at the $7 billion for rooftop solar, or what they call zero emission technologies, Section 134C4 defines zero emission technologies as any technology that produces zero emissions of any air pollutant that is listed pursuant to Section 108A or any precursor to such an air pollutant, and any greenhouse gas. So those are pretty broad definitions in the statute itself. And so if you have a project that reduces any air toxics or any greenhouse gases, by definition, we're going to assume that that's going to qualify for IRA funding through the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. Now, the downside is Buy America, Build America, and Davis-Bacon apply to all these, along with the Justice 40 initiative. However, NEPA does not apply to these, which is good. So back to the concept of our Missouri Energy Infrastructure Bank. As I mentioned before, we do not receive capital or funding from the state of Missouri. However, we do have broad statutory authority. We are looking to, we're hoping to capture some of this greenhouse gas fund and other IRA pods and bill pods through either partnerships with the Division of Energy or you know, some other mechanism to capitalize some projects through our bank. It's going to be a cooperative effort between us and Division of Energy in some ways, but it's going to be very challenging. All this money is competitive. There are no state allocations. So we're also anxiously awaiting, you know, even more detailed guidance from EPA on, you know, what the application procedures are going to be and what the expectations are for reporting. So there's a lot yet to discover. And finally, one of the biggest challenges for EPA is all this money has to be awarded by September of 2024, which for those of us in government, that's the blink of an eye from right now. So things are going to move very fast, and we're again hoping our goal is to capture some of this funding somehow to leverage a project for the state of Missouri and provide at least a platform statewide to provide low-income financing for as many projects as we can. So we hope to partner with some of you perhaps, and if so, feel free to reach out to me and we can talk through some possibilities. But if you have any questions? Yes, sir.
And Joe, if you wouldn't mind just repeating for the folks online what the question was, that would be great. I'll get a microphone as well.
Yeah, if I understood your question correctly, I had stated that we are ahead of some states as far as standing up a green bank, but behind several others. When I say we are behind several others, there are well-established green banks, as you know, in Rhode Island, Connecticut, New York, California. Some other states have nothing in place. They have no statute, no authorities whatsoever. Our statutes are very broad. They've been in place since 1972. We have the authority to finance any energy project, energy development, and renewables, whatever it might be. So that's when I say we're ahead of some states. We have the infrastructure in place. We just don't have the marketing, so a lot of the details in place yet on how some of these things might work. But
hi, Joe. Can you hear me?
yes,
That's an insane amount of money. I mean, that's in the timeline that we're talking about here is like warp speed by regulatory standards. My understanding is that eligibility is limited to states and nonprofits, municipalities. Is there any, can utilities participate at all?
for the 7 billion,
Right.
no, not on the rooftop solar. Is my understanding. The eligibilities are only states, municipalities, tribes, and certain nonprofits.
Has there been any guidance in terms of how much funds could be allocated to states, or like an estimates out there? I mean,
Well, if you divide 7 billion by 60, it comes out to about 116 million.
Okay.
So the potential is pretty big. The challenge, which we really didn't state, you are right, that's a lot of money. And domestic sourcing is going to be a problem. So everybody's going to be trying to, install solar all at the same time. There are already only so many domestic suppliers. So there's going to be some challenges ahead on, actual deployment and implementation. So
Excellent. Thanks.
Yes, sir.
It's my understanding that so Missouri, we don't have any federally recognized tribes. Is that correct? And so does that mean that the regional planning commissions are eligible, or is that um
They might be. I don't know. I'd have to look at the statute again and how it is a very specific definition in the statute itself on what the eligible nonprofits are. So, but my understanding is most likely not. They would not be a direct applicant. The 2 or 3 nationally for the 20 billion, I don't think they'd qualify, but they would most likely qualify maybe as a local lender if they can prove certain things according to the guidance. So there's still a lot out there to figure out. So.
And that question was whether or not regional planning commissions are party. So, Joe, one question for you is, if you were like, what is your biggest hurdle? If you felt like there was a domino that could be pushed that could really get this started for Missouri, what would that be?
I think that's a good question. Obviously, we're struggling with processes really. What's it going to look like? What areas do we want to focus on? I mean, with the rooftop solar, obviously it's self-defining, but the biggest challenge is going to be incentivizing the low income and disadvantaged communities to take on these projects. I think some of those communities, individuals in those communities, I think they're going to be more worried about putting food on the table than getting rooftop solar. So I think we're going to have to convince EPA that community solar is going to be more important or more practical to deploy. But again, I think it's generating that demand and getting that pipeline in place for projects.
So in Minnesota, they focused solely on, this was not regarding the Green Bank, but they developed a program where they focused solely on multifamily solar. And they had a revolving loan program very similar to what you're trying to create there.
Mhm.
Have you had any discussions or thought about that process? Because multifamily in general, as folks know, right, for energy efficiency is really tough and solar stuff, but you might be able to put those two together. Has that been brought up before?
Yeah, it's certainly been brought up. Excuse me. Multifamily housing is, we kind of consider that one of the priorities to focus on. So, I think it's easier to scale. So, yeah, the answer is yes. That's something we'd be very interested in. And we have talked with the building exchanges in both metro areas. So they're looking to be a partner in trying to implement something as well. So we're excited about that.
Well, remind me, and I'll try to remember as well. When we're done, I can connect you with Peter Klein in Minnesota, who developed the program up there.
Mhm.
And maybe they used PACE for that, but the difference between what you're trying to do and what PACE does is very, very minimal.
Yeah.
So maybe there's something that we can learn and address there as well. We do have a couple questions online. The first question is, how does the Missouri Energy Infrastructure Bank integrate work with cities or private capital?
Ideally, we're looking to mimic our current program with DNR's water and wastewater revolving fund. We essentially take some capital, use that as either a reserve fund to issue bonds off of, or an investment fund to buy down the interest rates of projects. So with whatever capital we can get our hands on, we use that as security, issue bonds to fund the projects. And that way, if using bad math, we can take $10 million in capital and issue $100 million in bonds to have a 10 times multiplier. So, and that can work for regional lenders as well. So, but typically we're tapping into the national capital markets.
And I'm pretty sure the answer is no. But one other question online was, do you have an example of a a green building project that this infrastructure bank has done? Or would, I think there's a no there, but maybe your top priority?
Well, we're actually working on one right now. We're able to capture some low interest capital, and we're going to use that exact same example. We're going to use that as a reserve fund. We'll be issuing bonds for the city of Springfield that will be funding their landfill gas recovery system. They have to expand. And for a future phase of that project, they may be building a upgrade facility for that gas and then selling it on the national market. So for renewable credits. So that's our pilot project that we're looking at right now with scraping some money together that with one of our other partners. But so that's kind of the example that we're looking at.
Great. Any other questions?
So how does net metering figure into this funding, especially if we're talking about community solar?
That's a good question. I'm going to turn around and look at the regulators for that.
I mean, I could. I
Take a
think-
stab at it.
Yeah. So that was actually something I was thinking about when you were talking about multifamily solar, is that raises some interesting questions in terms of, in long story short, how you allocate the array amongst the residents in a particular multifamily facility. In terms of single family, I mean, I think it would just be regular net metering would be my assumption. I mean, there are some interesting questions if we do start to creep up, because there's a statutory cap in effect, where I believe it's somewhere around 5% of a utility's load. Once there's equivalent net metered solar, then the utilities don't have to accept any more net metering. And that's kind of fuzzy. I'm remembering that very fuzzily from that part of the net metering statute I've looked at, and I see Jeff nodding. So in effect, there's that. And like I say, the multifamily question is really interesting and something we've tried to think through before.
I was curious, are there any domestic content requirements in order to receive and utilize these funds?
Yeah, all the projects must utilize domestic American iron and steel. Any manufactured product has to be made in America. So it's going to be a challenge. I don't believe so. I think BAB is going to be here to stay. The Build America, Buy America. So.
All right, there are two more questions online. One was one of the online folks has an active DAC that is wanting to go net zero, and they were wondering how they can work with you to accelerate this process.
I would suggest to reach out to us again and excuse me, either through their local CDFI could be an avenue. Excuse me, or just reach out directly to the authority, and we'll stay in touch with them.
This individual's in the St. Louis region. What are like the top 2 CDFIs in St. Louis that you would recommend?
I would have to look them up. I'm not familiar. Thank you very much.
Okay. The next question was, in your opinion, what is the entry point for private capital into underinvested neighborhoods?
Well, that's a good question, and we're not prepared to answer that yet either. We just don't. None of these programs are developed enough yet. We're still waiting on more detailed guidance from EPA. So those are all very good questions, but we're not to the point where we can answer those yet, unfortunately. And we're probably going to be looking to some of the other states for examples and some of the more mature green banks out there, and how they implement some of these programs and deploy these resources. So anyway.
Well, that's great. Thank you, Joe, very much. Please join me in thanking Joe for sharing that information. part of that windfall is the IRA and the BIL. And so, Marty, up to you to share us all the great news there.
Yeah, good morning. Marty Hyman with DNR's Division of Energy. Know a lot of the folks in the audience. Good to see y'all. And I want to, I just want to give a shout out to Joe. I think we're really starting to partner up very well on the infrastructure bank stuff. That's something that we've talked about in this state for years, and we're finally starting to get a foothold on that. So just a quick disclaimer that this presentation really isn't the official information on all of these different pots of money I'm about to go over. Really, for that information, I would suggest you go to what the feds release in funding opportunity announcements, and eventually what we end up putting out there as these programs get rolling. So I think a lot of folks are familiar with who we are, but just briefly, we're Missouri State Energy Office, focused on affordable, reliable Missouri-made energy. We assist communities across Missouri with particular needs and projects, and serve as a source of energy information for Missourians. Most of our funding traditionally has come through the U.S. Department of Energy through its state energy program and weatherization assistance program. We also operate off of earnings from our energy loan program, which is available to public-facing entities like K through 12 schools, public and private not-for-profit hospitals, local governments. And also we do typically receive a portion, about 10% of the state low-income home energy assistance program funds that goes towards additional weatherization. Our three main sections, I'm in the analysis coordination education section. There's also the low-income weatherization assistance program section, and then our energy efficiency of resources section, which is where the loan program is housed. And just a quick plug, we do have an open loan cycle right now, if you are aware of any public sector type entities that have some good energy projects they're looking at. The new funding sources obviously are, I call it the BIL, but Josh alluded to the fact that it's also called the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, or IIJA, and then also the Inflation Reduction Act, or IRA. The IRA has a bunch of tax incentives in it. I'm not a tax professional. I am not going to touch those. I would suggest you talk to a tax professional about those, but there are a lot of them. In many cases, and I think Joe covered this already, these BIL and IRA programs are going to come with a good number of strings, including Davis-Bacon prevailing wage, Build America, Buy America, NEPA, and Justice 40. And honestly, Justice 40 could be its own session. I was just talking with Dr. Mark about that, there are a number of different tools out there to define what is a disadvantaged community. And it's going to be somewhat case by case for now. And in a lot of cases, my answer to your questions may be we're still waiting on guidance, because that is the honest truth. Another thing to consider in terms of the timing of fund release to the citizens of Missouri is that we have to have legislative appropriations. Either some of it's broad, some of it is a bit more specific. It's a little complicated and goofy, but we do have to have appropriations authority in addition to standing up the programs. I'm going to cover a lot of programs here that are formula based in terms of how we get the money for the state. We're definitely open to collaborating with entities who want to take the lead on other ideas that are more competitive in nature if time permits, but we are going to focus a lot of our attention on making sure we deliver those formula programs well. And one thing that we are heavily encouraging people to do if they want to get updates, go to our website and click the big green button that says get updates on this issue, and you can sign up for emails where we will give you the information once we know the information. So the first slide, it all fit on the screen. That's exciting. The first slide here really just talks about our formula and or non-competitive funding that we're getting under the BIL. State Energy Program really is a boost to our usual SEP funding, and that's just going to support a lot of our program activities. We're looking at focusing on resilience, kind of building off the Roadmap to Resilience competitive grant we did a few years back, as well as energy education and literacy. So, things like how to read your bill and workforce development. Weatherization also is another significant boost to our usual funding. And fairly self-explanatory what that's used for. We're in the process of implementing those funds. DOE is releasing them in tranches, basically as you show progress on implementing those additional funds. Grid Resilience Formula Funds is a very new program that was funded under Section 4101D of the BIL. That's really focused on improving adaptive capacity of the grid in response to disruptive events, very nuts and bolts things generally like poles, wires, reconductoring, undergrounding, an allowance for microgrids as well, but not for new generation. So it starts to get a little weird once you get into that part of it. We know our allocation for the first 2 years is 13.9 million. We're not sure what DOE will release for years 3 through 5. We're guessing 6.9 million, but that's very much subject to change. Our application for the state to receive those funds has been submitted to DOE, and we're in the process of working with them on basically touching things up, so to speak. The Energy Efficiency Revolving Loan Fund Capitalization Grant Program is very exciting, in my opinion. That's 9.1 million that we can use for loans and maybe some grants to residential and commercial sectors for audits, upgrades, retrofits. Our application for the state to receive those funds isn't due until about the end of May. Right now, what we're tentatively looking at is a loan loss reserve for residential low to moderate income efficiency. A loan loss reserve is really just a fancy way of saying basically we'll be there to back up a certain amount of loans, which in theory allows you to do a number of things like expand lending to more risky sectors, lower interest rates, and really stretch your dollars farther than they would if you were just going to do a direct loan. The Energy Efficiency and Conservation Block Grant Program, some folks may remember that from the Recovery Act days. It's back, but with a much smaller amount of money, this time only 2.4 million. Basically, what the deal there is we're going to pass that money through to localities that didn't get direct formula allocations. So areas like Kansas City and St. Louis get their own direct allocations. So really, this would be talking about smaller towns in Missouri. And that can be used for a really broad array of purposes, anything from setting up a financing mechanism to planning for energy efficiency to renewables. It's really a broad multi-use pot. IRA is, of course, the big one that we're looking at, and it's also one of the more nebulous ones at this point, unfortunately. We're getting about $151 million split between fairly evenly between two different programs. The first one, which they're now calling the Home Efficiency Rebates Program, is really for whole home efficiency. So it's not measure specific, it's more what can you demonstrate through measurement or modeling. The second program is now called the Home Electrification and Appliance Rebate Program. That one is much more measure specific. It's also very much targeted at low to moderate income, whereas the whole home program, while it has additional incentives for low to moderate income individuals or families, it's not exclusively for those individuals. Right now, we're still waiting on guidance that we expect maybe midsummer along with funding release. But as I alluded to earlier, it's going to be a little bit before that money actually hits the streets because the state has to submit its application and then we have to stand up the program. And so I think there are a lot of steps still, even once that funding is fully released. The last one here is kind of probably may not belong on this slide. It's a little unclear. It's supposed to be money for training contractors to implement those two big pots of IRA money. But right now, we don't know exactly how it's going to be allocated or when. They may allocate some of it by formula. They may allocate none of it by formula. So that's a giant question mark for us and one that we're tracking. This is more of a catch-all for things that are sort of in our, things that are related to what we do, but that are more competitive in nature. The first one on resilient and efficient codes, we actually partnered to support an application by the Metropolitan Energy Center and the Midwest Energy Efficiency Alliance on a grant that's really more focused on workforce development and outreach related codes implementation. That was submitted at the end of March, and we have not heard back yet from DOE. Hydrogen hubs, probably heard a good bit about that in the news. We did talk with a few entities, and you've probably seen in the press that we are partnering for now with Nebraska and Iowa on their submission. That was submitted earlier this month, and I think we're still waiting to hear more from DOE and from hub partners on exactly how that'll take shape, if at all, if DOE awards it, but also in the Missouri context. Auditor training is another one of those where it's a large question mark in terms of when it'll come out. That slide is not outdated. The last I checked, it was supposed to have been released in the first quarter of 2023, but obviously it is no longer the first quarter of 2023. Grid resilience and innovation partnerships. I think there are a few of our utilities who said they're looking at money under that pot. And we have looked at that as well. Basically, that some of that is the competitive analog to what we're doing by formula allocation through 40101D of the BIL. Other parts of it are more focused on things like smart grids and innovation. And then the last one is basically, so if you're familiar with MoDOT's implementation of the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Formula Program, some of this, about half of it, is the competitive analog, but it also covers natural gas vehicle fueling infrastructure, hydrogen vehicle fueling infrastructure, and medium and heavy duty propane vehicle fueling infrastructure. And so half that money is along corridors like NEVI is. The other half is more for community fueling and charging. So like rural areas, the areas that aren't on your major highways. There is an application cycle open right now for about 700 million, which implies that there will be future cycles open. I don't know, how realistic it would be for us to work with folks on something due May 30th at this point. But that's definitely an area that we're thinking about. Is there something the state might be able to do? This is just kind of the grab bag slide of other things that, they're worth noting, but they're not necessarily things we're directly involved in. I guess with NEVI, with the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Formula Program, we did talk some with MoDOT as it was working on its state plan, but it's absolutely MoDOT's money. They are in charge of implementing it. And Joe mentioned the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, which is great because now I don't have to put him on the spot since he went before me. So again, just a reminder, if you want updates, go to our website, click the big green button. If you have, more specific questions, we can try to answer them. Just give us an email or call us, and we will do what we can. And with that, I'll take questions. Yes. This one? Okay.
So when you third one down talks about improved adaptive response to disruptive events.
Yeah.
When that was submitted, we delineate what types of resources or products.
No, so the advice, and so the question was, did we delineate what sorts of measures would go under the grid resilience formula funding when the state submitted its application? No, we tried to keep it rather broad because we didn't want, in fact, that was DOE's advice, was to keep your program narrative broad and not try to box yourself in. To be honest, the measures that are allowed are pretty well set out in statute in the BIL, if you look that up. I don't know how much creativity DOE is going to allow on that one. About the furthest afield it goes is microgrids and storage that's used for disruptive events, although the storage doesn't have to be exclusively used for that. DOE has explicitly said no to any sort of new generation period. So that applies to both diesel gennies as well as new solar.
On that note, you also mentioned a couple of times now microgrids here, and that new generation would not be funded. So storage will be funded. What about the other components of microgrid costs, like controller, microgrid integration equipment,
right?
All those things.
My understanding is that's the kind of thing that could potentially be eligible. So basically the parts of the microgrid that don't involve the actual solar array, say, or CHP unit or what have you, as well as storage that would be used for disruptive events. So yeah, you're absolutely correct.
All right. Marty, thank you so much for all of that great information. It is a lot to digest. And
too fast?
Nope, you're good.
Okay.
We're at the end. So a lot to digest. Thank you, Marty. So our next panel up is on large power users, very broad topic, but we have two fantastic